Good morning. How are you guys doing? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Let's see. I kind of worked on the lighting just because this white fabric can be a little bit tricky to see. I don't want it to get overexposed like it keeps doing, but I'm hoping that it'll stay consistent. So let me know what you think. And let's get going. How's your Saturday going? Pretty excited to be here. Pretty excited to make this dress again because I really enjoyed making the first one. I'm going to be using the fabric as a facing for my neckline, not fusible interfacing. And I'm also going to be turning it to the outside, and it's going to be a different grain line so that you can see it as like a design detail. And my front panel at the waist, this is the one I'm making right here, by the way, is going to also be on a horizontal cross grain, so the cross grain. Hello, Rebecca. How's it going? What are you sewing today? Are you making anything fun? Cutting anything out? Anything like that? You've made this, right? You've made this, I think I remember you saying you have, or you're about to. So I need to pick up more interfacing because I'm trying to be a little bit more conventional and use fusible interfacing in some places. And the stuff I had was, I keep complaining about it with you guys. Well, I haven't even turned my machine on yet. Oh yeah, I have. But I ran out. So I am forced now to go purchase some interfacing, or at least something I can use as interfacing. And so I have to use non-fusible for this, which I would actually prefer if I'm going to use interfacing. So I don't think it's ideal for this waist panel. I really do think that if you use an interfacing for it, you should probably use a fusible. Oh, a quilt, nice. But I don't have any left. So I'm going to use just regular non-fusible interfacing. I'm actually going to attach it to it with a really small stitch length. Not really small, just something small so that it is pretty secure and it doesn't get in my way. I know how much you love watching me thread a needle. I don't know why. I just can't do it on the first try when you're watching me. Because I can't put my head to the side because I'll block the camera, so I can't really see the hole. And my needle threads left to right. Hello, pumpkin seed. How's it going? All right, so I'm just going to attach my interfacing. I'm going to do it as unintrusively as possible. Like just right up to the edge. Today it really feels like fall and I'm pretty excited. So I'm wearing my tunic number 1 that we sewed the other day, and I really love that we ended up doing this neckline detail. And I'm wearing my ginger jeans. And I actually think next time I'm going to go down a size if I stick with this stretchy of a denim, because I do feel a little loose and they're actually really comfortable and I kind of like that. But it just means that the rise is a little bit too long. So, all right, so there is my waist panel with the interfacing, and I'm going to set it aside. And I was reading through the directions so that I can do this in the same steps that you would if you were doing this at home. Yeah, I know. It's so much cooler here. The wind was blowing last night. I left the window open. There's leaves on the street today, which I know that means raking, but I really like that. Like, I never really grew up somewhere. I know we might get rain. I didn't grow up somewhere where there were like leaves on the ground. I grew up in Southern California. So, like in any season, there's like 1.5 seasons there. In here, there's a little bit more. It's very hot in the summer here though. So, okay. So my first step was to do the interfacing. You would do it also to your neckline pieces. But like I said, when I first started, I'm going to put my neckline, my facings to the outside of the garment. I saw someone do this by accident and I thought, oh, I'm going to do this and use it as a design detail. I also raised the center front V of the neckline about 2 inches so that I don't have to worry about bending over and things like that. It was pretty low cut on me, the other one. So let's see. So your first few steps are there. I'm doing the view A, and you're going to do the center front seam. I'm doing French seams since lots of people don't have sergers, and you absolutely do not need a serger to do garment making at all. Sergers are not that old of an invention, so I firmly believe that you really don't need them for most sewing. If you're doing a lot of knits, yes, you're going to want a serger. They're just more ideal for that. You'll have a more successful garment, and you'll probably be a lot happier with the results. Plus, it'll last longer. It's just kind of the nature of how it is. Let's see. I'm going to just mark my other point here. Takes me a little bit to get going when we first start up. Let's see. So it turns out that I will probably be able to stream on this coming Thursday. Like I think I told you this past Thursday that I'm going out of town, but apparently I don't leave till Friday. So I think I can join you guys Thursday. I'm hoping, because I would rather do that. Oh, I lost one of my things. Okay, so let's mark this one. I feel a little fumble fingered right now. Sorry. Sorry if it's painful to watch. Let me just get warmed up here. I've been just sitting here surfing Instagram, looking at other streams, looking at my to-do list, stuff like that. And then I was like, oh shoot, I've killed enough time. I got to get going. You know that feeling? Let's see. This is a little tricky to line up once you've kind of pulled it apart, because you have this. So this is the front pattern piece. And it has this front waist cutout for that panel. So. I know. Pumpkin seeds, you mean like when someone says, oh, did you make that? And you're like, well, wait, why are you asking me that? Is it obvious in a good way, or is it obvious that you can tell it's homemade? I like to think that it's because that we picked a unique fabric selection that you really can't get on the rack. And, oh, yeah, sergers they can make things look more off the rack. It's true. But you know, when you do French seams and things like that and other finishing techniques, you won't miss it. It's just a little bit of extra sewing depending on the garment. So, you know, I feel like I may have cut this out wrong. What do you guys think? I think I might have cut this out wrong. I think I assumed that this was on the fold because I cut it out like my other one, and now I'm realizing that I don't think it is. So I may have to cut this in half right now. How did I not notice that? I did that on my collar the other day for the Archer. I was like, why do I need two of this collar? It's on the bias. And then I realized I need two because it's not on the fold. Okay, so let me look at this. Yeah, I think there's supposed to be a seam there. Oh yeah, there is. Yeah, so I'm just gonna cut this because that was the sew line. Let's make sure. Before we just start willy-nilly cutting, because that is my MO, to willy-nilly cut and then deal with the consequences. It's one way you get better, folks, is when you make a ton of errors. Yeah, ironing does make your stuff, if you iron as you go and not just at the end, it makes things look a little more polished. The result is better. And they don't do that in a factory, but did I just pull that out again? I did. They don't iron in a factory. Irons don't even exist in a factory. But they also do have the benefit of the serger and setting it up differently. So, let's see here. Okay, I'm done fiddling with this. I wish my pins would stay in there. Very annoying. All right, I'm just going to look at this right here. And the way I'm going to, I feel like sewing is a little bit like math. Sometimes you check your work before you get too far. And once you start understanding your pattern pieces more and more often, the more items you sew, you'll start understanding like what's going to sew to what and how to check if you're on the right track. And so this isn't, I know it goes right like this. I'm just looking at it because that's a seam allowance and this is a seam allowance. So that's how it goes. And if this pleat is gone, which is like something like that, yeah, so we're going to cut that. Just want to make sure before I cut my dress in half and I'm like, okay, that's it, folks. Where do I get most of my fabric? I buy it locally and online. And the place I go locally is called Honey Run Quilters. I think they do sell online. And then I buy from Hearts Fabric because they're in California and they ship fast. It does mean I have to pay sales tax, but I don't mind supporting my state. And then, yeah, for all my fashion fabrics, I'm buying them at a local fabric store or at somewhere that sells garment-specific fabrics because you don't really want to sew all of your clothes out of quilting cotton. It's just not a garment weight fabric. There's ways to make the quilting cotton work for garments, and if you're tricky about what you use it on, which garment you use it on, and how you cut it. But for the most part, you really want to get what they call fashion fabrics and things. So they're a little bit lighter weight, they're drapier, they're going to be more flattering on you. So, all right, so let's see. This is the right side of the fabric, and it is really hard. Like, I cannot tell the difference, but I benefited from this piece when I got it. I did get this at my local fabric store. It had the sticker on it and it says, this is the right side of the fabric. And I was like, oh, well, that's helpful. I didn't even realize that I wouldn't be able to tell. All right, so when you start a French seam, you wrong sides together first, and that's how this is already pinned. And so I'm going to do a 1/4 inch, just a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to make my stitch length back to kind of its normal length. Ideal is about 12 stitches per inch. I have not checked that in like over a decade, if that's actually what I'm doing. I just kind of know what I like now and what works. You want something that's secure, but not something too hard to remove. If it's too tight also, you may have other issues. Might draw it up. But you definitely don't want to make your life a headache. I just heard another pin drop. These pins, man, they need to stay in. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure there's no little like thread hairs hanging off here. This fabric is a little bit more open of a weave, so there is that tendency to have these little pieces come off, and that is what pokes through your French seam and makes it look kind of ratty. I honestly haven't sewn a lot of French seams until I started streaming with you guys. True confessions. But it's a little more convenient for me not to use the serger, and I use a much heavier weight on my serger than most people do because I use it for my little factory here, and I'm using a Tex 40, not a Tex 27. So I find the serging can look a little bulky on a lot of my garments because they're garment weight fabrics. They're not the ones we're using here for our items. I'm having trouble getting this pin now out, of course, right? I'm pretty sure I don't need this marking. I just marked it because I thought this was a big dart, but it is hey, Malin or Malin? I've known people with your exact name and they pronounce it both ways. Malin. I have a unique name. My name is Sarami, by the way. I fail to introduce myself all the time. It rhymes with Jeremy. It's my mom and my dad apparently couldn't agree on the name. One wanted Sarah, one wanted Emily. They put it together. That's how it got there. So yeah, so I am finding that it's more convenient not to use my serger because I don't have to hop up and move machines. The cameras aren't set up over there, and then that way you can see me. So when you're doing your French seams, you want to press open the seam that you just sewed. Like press it open. And normally I would do that. But I'm just going to finger press it. Just like this. That helps a little bit too. And then you'll iron it on the edge that it's going to sew. I explained that just really badly just now. I'll show you in just a second. Malin. How about I'll just pronounce it differently every time. Okay, so now you would press it along the seam edge you just sewed, just like that. and the fold basically. And now I'm going to do my 3/8 of an inch to take up the rest of that 5/8 inch seam allowance. My throat plate has has lines on it for the seam allowances. Not all of the throat plates of my machine end up having those. I actually go through a lot of throat plates, and this is the throat plate right here, the piece that surrounds your feed dogs. I go through a lot of throat plates. I have a bag full of failed throat plates. So I'm really happy that the one I currently have has the seam allowances on it. Mainly because I really like the long grooved line. I think that there's an optical illusion when you're sewing to not, like the machine wants to sew straight. Hi Kirby. If you just let your machine do the work, it's probably going to sew straighter than you would if you were guiding it without any guides. But I'm usually aiming for something and then I'll distrust it. And because sometimes we're not sitting perpendicular to the machine head like this, maybe we're off here, maybe we're off there, maybe we're looking in the camera, like your perspective of my machine right now is at an angle right here because here's my camera and here's my machine. And so it's really easy to think you're not sewing straight. So I use all these lines as guides, and sometimes my throat plate doesn't have them, but I really do like these long grooves. They help. Sometimes there's no numbers, sometimes just smooth. Oh, awesome, Malin. I'm glad you're here. It's really nice when people talk in chat. I don't feel so much like I'm talking to myself and wondering if you guys can hear me or not. Okay, so let's see. That was the center front seam, and I think you do the upper one as well. I'm also trying to sew a little bit slower because I feel like I'm rushing it because I feel like I have to entertain you. And I don't want it to feel that way. I really want this to be accessible to everybody. I know that I sometimes make it look easy, but it's not always like that for me. I make mistakes constantly, and really, really bad ones too. And I just roll with it. I mean, it's just part of it. You've got to make the mistakes in order to move forward. And I make them live on stream. Anyone will tell you that. I think part of learning how to, become a good problem solver is dealing with your mistakes. And sometimes there is no solution, and you really did ruin it. Did I just do this wrong? Like, am I telling? Oh no, I did. Okay. Case in point. But I'm trying to slow down a little bit because if you wanted to sew this, I would love it if you could follow along and watch the video once it's uploaded. Or also be able to pause it and just see, like, what is she doing right there? All right. No, I did do that wrong. Oh, no, I didn't. Oh my gosh. French seams really confuse me, you guys. True confession, man. Yeah, I'm on the right track. Oh my God. I can't hear what you're saying. Tell me I'm doing it right. I was listening to that podcast that Rebecca actually recommended, Love to Sew podcast. And I haven't listened to all of them. I've only listened to a few, but I listened to one recently on, I think it's called Sewing Struggles. And you don't have to sew fast, though. My machine's really speedy. I'd rather you sew confidently than fast. But listening to that Sewing Struggles, I have to admit, I was actually kind of teary-eyed through most of it. It really pained me to hear how helpless a lot of people feel in their sewing. I don't like the idea that people feel that way. I don't want people to feel that way. I have felt that way, and I still do sometimes. More over business things rather than sewing things, though. Okay, nope. Stay there, Pin. Stay. Okay, so now we have these massive pleats in this one. They go this way. They go this way. Good. I marked them where they go, like that. So there's a little notch right here. I just nip into the fabric when I have a notch. If there's triangles that poke out, which is kind of an old school way to do it, or maybe more of a purchase, like a simplicity, like big pattern thing, that's what they would do. I don't cut the little triangle out, like I don't leave it extending past the cut edge of the fabric. You can if you like that visual, But I just nip into the fabric a little bit. Just make sure you don't do it past your seam allowance. Then that's hard to recover. And the reason I knew that this went this way is because the pleat goes this way is because it lines up flush with the seam. So if I try and do it the other way, like this, it just doesn't line up. Like I can't even get that up there, see? And then I have this pleat like that. So I know it goes, actually, if I were trying to do it the wrong way and it was still inverted, yeah, it would just, it's just not gonna lay flat. Like it feels really wrong, so. Oh, you listen to that podcast too? Yeah, I'm just starting. I don't listen or watch like podcasts and things like that, and it's not out of like that I don't want to. It's just that I just don't have the time. You know, there's a lot of content out there, and I know I'm adding to that now. So I'm just looking for my little nip, and it goes to that fold right there, just like that. And when I'm pinning this, I'm trying to make sure that really I'm lining this up on the seam line right there. The cut edge is really important, but also you want to make sure that your seam lines, it's lined up on the seam line because it'll hang better. Did I just do that? Wait, why are those going different ways? Ah ha ha, look at that. You can do this 2 different ways. Why? I feel like this is the right way. Wait a minute, you can do this 2 different ways. I am wrong here. Does it go like that? Let's look at the directions. Let's see. So that's the fold. That's the interior. The fold is on top. And this is the inside of the garment. Let's flip it over. I've never made this one. I have made the Charlie, and there is there's a video up on the YouTube channel of me sewing the other version of the Charlie, and it's gathered right here. I had no idea this was pleats when I cut it out. I literally thought they were darts. I didn't even know there were darts there. So I try and go into these a little bit blind just so that you can kind of see me troubleshoot and figure things out, just like you might be. That looks more like the picture, right? Yeah, let's go with that. So that means the pleat goes, okay, I'm gonna trust that. That means on the outside that the pleat is going like this. Anything that accentuates my belly, I'm not a fan of. Can you guys hear me on that? Let's see. I want to see what it looks like. What is this right here? Okay. Trying to be delicate because of all my pins. Oh yeah, so that's what it's going to look like. Just like that. Okay. Now I'm going to stay stitch this. I'm going to line it up a little better. This distance in here, this whole thing right here is really important to be respectful of your seam allowances so that you're setting yourself up to do this waist panel the best way possible. I think it's the most intimidating part of sewing this garment is that waist panel, but it's also the most special part of this garment. And when I did the other one, I did it out of rayon. I did it and it was gathered, and it went really, really well. It made me feel very successful. I like that. I like anything in sewing that makes me feel successful. That's my heel lift. I have my heels on my feet are pushing up my presser foot. So now I push harder and it cuts the thread and lifts up the presser foot. So that's why you see it go up and down without my hands raising it right here. Okay. I'm just gonna take a look at this. So when you put these pleats together, this measurement right here on the bottom should match the one on the top. Should be the same, just like that. That's a good double check, right? Just like we're saying, like check your math, you know, before you turn in your homework. Do the reverse problem. That's one way of checking it, because it's better to set yourself up going forward so that you have as few problems later as possible. Like if warning bells are going off, don't move forward, right? Okay, so I'm going to press all of this really quick. I'm going to press all this so that we can have the easiest time possible. Right now I'm going to stay stitch the corners where the stitching is going to be of this waist panel. And so when I make my markings, anytime there's interior markings on a garment, I poke my pin into where I like it to go. So that way when I come back to it, I know that the way I did it is that it's where the pin went in rather than where it's coming out. So that's how I know where it is. And I'm going to include this little pleat with it just to kind of give it more stability. I'm gonna make sure I'm not stitching underneath, and I'm also gonna double check my seam allowance because I'm pretty sure this is 5/8 all the way around the waist panel. Let's just see if it says it right at the beginning. Pretty sure it's 5/8 except for on the neckline. I wish, oh, there we go, 5/8 or 5/8 inch, okay. I really wish seam allowances were really big on every pattern, and I didn't have to search. I always have to do that search right for where it is. So I'm just inside. I'm gonna go really close to my seam allowance. I'm going to stop with the needle down, pivot. These little lines are now at an angle up here, and it's really throwing me off. I'm trying not to look at them so that I'm making sure that I'm straight. So I know this is taking a while to set up, but I feel like when it's something really tricky, the more setup you do, the better. It's like any job, like when you're painting your bathroom or whatever, the more setup you do, the easier job you have of it. Same in sewing. Set yourself up for success if you can, you know? I always make mistakes when I rush too, and even when I'm like, oh, this is really easy, I can just whip this out. Then I make mistakes. You know what I mean? Right there's my needle hole. I feel like that's these lines are really throwing me off. Oh, visually. Okay. I'm gonna look at this, make sure I got it straight. All right. I decided to press my center front seam this way. No reason why, just being consistent. Okay, I'm gonna press those a little bit. Okay, and I'm also going to take out, maybe they fell out by now, the other pins that I had in there. What is this one? I don't know what that is. All right, time for the fun stuff. Now where's my waist facing? Did I just lose them? Oh yeah. Okay. Okay, yeah, don't speed up. Yeah, I hope so. This is really not my style of fabric, but I really like how clean it looks. I don't know. Kind of klutzy for white. All right, let's see. I have to remember, you go from the right side out, right? Yeah. Look at, I'm following the directions for you guys, okay? That's what I'm doing here. Yeah, so you're going to sew right sides together. And they look like they do it from the inside of the garment. This all seems so foreign to me, and I just did this. All right, so next we're gonna clip our corners. You're gonna go right up to that stitching, like really close to it. I think that this can be the scariest part, is clipping your corners, because now you're committed. Even if this was the wrong spot, this is where it's going now. The one thing you can't put back in fabric is when you've cut it. I'm going to mark the center of this by just creasing it like that. And then line it up with the seam line. Harder to see on my interfacing. I'll use a few pins, but probably not very many because the seams are so short. And I'm going to sew it, I think, like, let's see, how did I do it last time? Like this? Yeah. I'm doing this wrong. I'm already doing this wrong. Yeah, see, I want to do it from this side. That's what it was. Okay. I'm a little thrown off today. Sorry, guys. We all have off days, right? I don't know why. But I'm excited about sewing this. I cut out 2 more archers on Thursday. I'm going to sew those up soon. All right, so I'm going to look at this. Do they pull the stuff to the front? Probably, or to yourself. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the gathered one. It's a little different. Oh my gosh, there we go. Yeah, they do it from, yeah, I don't know why this is looking really confusing to me this time. But we'll just see. If I get confused, I'll just stop. I'm just going to do my instincts, rather. Sometimes it goes better. I'm not going to back tack just in case I need to pull it out. And I'm going to meet that stitching when I come around to the end as well. So here's the deal. The thing to think about when you're sewing this panel is just focus on the seam that you're sewing at the moment. Don't worry about that corner coming up. Don't worry about anything, but just don't catch the rest of the dress in the seam. And just think about just this little stitch panel right here, this little seam. And you want to see how it wants to curve like that. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure it's straight. You're going to get this little piece out of the way right here. That's the end. Can you see that okay? So this little corner right here, I'm lifting it up and getting it out of the way. And I'm making sure that this is as straight as possible without stretching it. I'm going to go to my clipped edge. And now I'm going to pivot. So here's my little panel right here. Here's my end. Just focusing on now the seam that I'm going to do next. I'm going to make sure none of this dress is going to get caught in there. And I think anytime I'm a little nervous or intimidated, I try and just break it down to as small steps as possible and just focus on the thing that's in front of me at that moment. Okay, I'm going to go to this corner now that I clipped. Right there. I'm going to pivot. And see, if you're pivoting right at those corners, your seam allowance is still going to line up. And I'm going right inside that stay stitch line because I don't want any of it to show. Even though it's a little wider right there. If it were too wide, I'd probably have to take it out because I don't want to mess around with the seam allowance. Okay. Remember, make sure it just doesn't sag over like this. You want to get this line straight as possible. Parallel to this, we're just focusing on this little section here to this side here. As I get close, I'm going to make sure none of my other fabric is getting in the way. And you'll see that to make it lay as flat as possible, I kind of pull this over here. I'm getting the dress out from underneath it. It's getting really crowded in there. So I'm going up to my corner. I'm going to pivot again. It is a really funny placement, yeah. And so the moment of truth is coming. Will it all match when I get to the beginning? So now I'm making sure I'm getting all my dress out of the way. I'm feeling under there. Pivoting. I'm trusting my seam allowance because that's all I can see right now. I really can't see a whole lot. So there's my beginning. So look at that. It's going to line up really nicely once I keep it straight. I think it's going to line up nicely. I definitely want it straight, especially because it's got a bit of a stripe going on. Let's see if that's a good turning point right there. I think I'm going to go one more stitch. Right there. That's what I want. All right, let's see how I did. It's okay. These are okay. I'm not happy with this one. Oh wait, it's actually calming down now. So this is when you want to make sure your stripes are cut perfect, right? But I feel like it's either an optical illusion. What's going on there? Definitely don't want any optical illusions. I thought this one was going to be my one that gave me trouble, but I think it's just right there. It can be trimmed, it can be clipped a little bit closer to the pivot point to make it release. So this is what it looks like on the wrong side. Just like that. And see, this side is pushing up because of all of this going on here. This pleat is going to force it to push up. It does fight with it a little bit. Just like that. And I use the piece with the interfacing on that side because it's the outside. So yeah, I feel like this, because of this print, it looks crooked, you know? I'm going to check my work. It's a little narrower on this side, and so I could try to make this side narrow to match it. I just feel like when you start monkeying around with it, like it's not too bad, right? If I start monkeying around with it, I could end up creating an issue. So I think I'm going to leave it. See, look at that one does look a little straight, crooked right there. I think that's what's happening. That one looks crooked. How could I fix that? I think I can move this pivot point closer to the end. I'm a little nervous to do it, but I'm doing it. Why not? You see that? Can you see this stitching going right over here? It's this one right here. That one's a little off. But I'd have to ease that in, and that seems... I'm just going to see what happens. Okay? Let's see what happens. We could be so lucky to actually get this in on the first try, right? My other one went a little better. But I feel like it's better to troubleshoot it together, just in case you have the same exact issue. Let's see what happens. I'm just going to take this part a little bit. I'm just making sure the dress is hanging out of the way. And I want to pivot more like right here. So I'm going to try and get that right there. This fabric is relaxing, and remember that the dress doesn't have interfacing, but the panel does. So the panel isn't going to relax or stretch out because the interfacing is stabilizing it. That's what interfacing is. It's a stabilizer. The dress, on the other hand, doesn't have that benefit. And so this weave, and they do warn you about that, there's like, hey, if you have an open weave fabric, something that tends to fray, something that gets relaxed, maybe you should interface that square opening, the one that we stay stitched. We didn't do that. This isn't that loosey-goosey, but this is obviously what can happen if your fabric is a pain in the butt. Okay, so I want this to end about right there, which means that I may have to like ease this in a little bit. And I feel like it's right here. It's right where my pivot corner is trying to stretch out a little bit. I'm using my awl like a pointy finger. I'm really into my awl. You'll see me use it a lot and blab a lot about it a lot. Me and my awl. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot and see how I did there. You notice I'm not back tacking. It's not necessary. That looks a little better. Let's see if it's calmed down that optical illusion we're getting to. Oh my gosh, don't tell me that, Rebecca. Okay, this is what I've learned. Picking something with a print on it is makes you have to be more precise. So pick an all over print for your first one. That's my tip for the day. Okay, once this is ironed and all the seams are pressed to here, you know, like this, I think it's going to calm down a little bit. And so now we're gonna put our other one on. I'm not going to iron this to the inside yet because I need to sew this to it and I don't want the iron seams to fight me. So I'm going to try and get this in with as little hand sewing in the end as possible because I am a wimp when it comes to hand sewing and I hate it. So I'm using my original stitch line as a guide. All I need to make sure is that I don't catch the dress underneath. If I follow this stitch, we're just going to pretend like we're not setting this panel in again. We're just going to pay attention to the stitch line that we've already used and use it as our like guide for success here, right? And you're trying to get all of these to be enclosed, all these raw edges. That's what this little, it's like a little facing. So now I'm going to pivot. I'm trying not to get any of the dress. The dress is really getting crowded in there and it really wants to ooch into these corners especially. Make sure your dress, especially if it's heavy and you do a long version, that it's all on top of the table so it's not pulling against your needle and fighting you. Because right now that's what it wants to do. And so I'm gonna actually kind of feel under here and pull the dress out from these corners right here, like that. Because I can feel it. Just like that. All we're doing is sewing a square. We are not setting this panel again. We're not worrying about that. We're just using that as a guide. And my interfacing, you can see it's hanging off the edge here. So it looks like it's not lining up, but it is lining up pretty good. I'm going to get my needle right on there. So now look at this. It's getting really tight. Now this is where I think the pattern is going to tell you to stop. But I'm going to go even just a half of an inch more is going to make it easier to hand sew it shut because it's going to have that little like edge there that like like kind of gives you that starting and stopping point for the hand sewing. Anything that makes my hand sewing less and easier, I'm a fan of, because I really am terrible at hand sewing. It's the irony of my life. That and the fact that I went to fashion school and really, you know, and my closet's always a mess. Okay. I'm going to take a chance and just back tag. So I just went to there. I'm going to see if I caught anything in there right now. It doesn't look like it. So that's what it looks like on this side. And now I'm going to do this other side. And I think I'm going to start from the end right here. You see all that dress in there? Those pleats really add a lot of bulk in there. It's the gathers. When I did the gather version, it was rayon, and so it gathered up really easy. It was really light, and it was easy to keep out of the way. This is a little bit stiffer because it's an ikat. Pumpkin seeds. Is there any patterns I like better than others? Do you mean pattern companies? It's a loaded question. I am a I was a pattern drafter in the garment industry for a long time, so I do actually have really strong opinions about patterns that I don't share all of, but I will try anything. I've only had to sew once, or not sew. I bought one home sewing pattern in the last, like, I think it was like 5 years ago, and I had to chuck the whole thing in the trash. I was so mad. And I will never buy that pattern company, and it's nothing I've sewn here, and I actually have never seen that pattern company on Instagram or anything, so maybe there's not around, maybe it didn't work out. And it really, what it was it was this really cute day dress, and it had cute pleats in the waist that kind of cinched it in, made it smooth. I really liked it. It was really flattering. And then when I went to cut it out, none of those pleats were marked on the pattern. You had to wing it. And I was like, nope, that's not okay with me. I'm not going any further with this. And I'd already cut it all out. It was such a big waste. Okay, so I'm going to start here. I can just feel my dress really wants to get in the way there. But as far as patterns, I try and sew things. You guys, I'm just going to sew it from this side. That's too tricky. I don't want you guys to have to do it either. I try and sew things that I really, really want. I feel like if you're a beginning sewer, stick to something you know you can probably finish, but maybe stretches your skills a tiny bit. Add maybe one, maybe two things new to your garment sewing at a time, and then do it a few times, because this is not something we do because it's cheaper or faster. We do this because we enjoy it, or we have fit issues and we don't want to buy home sewing or ready to wear garments. So you want this to be as painless as possible, and sometimes it's not. And so I say, and this is how I say it with knitting as well, pick something you really, really want, because you'll be really committed to it and you'll really want it in the end. Don't just pick it because everybody's doing it. Don't just pick it because it looks great on that girl that doesn't have your body type. Pick something that you have seen a lot of people with your body type wear. I love using hashtags on Instagram for that. This is really tricky, you guys. I feel like I could have, I feel like this wasn't as hard the first time. What I do is I look for the hashtag, like this one is hashtag Charlie Caftan, right? And then I look at all the different people that wear it. And admittedly, the Charlie Caftan is not my body type, usually what I see it on, but I thought I could pull it off. And I'm really glad that I did it. I feel like I'm doing this wrong. Why do I feel that way? I'm just going to go a tiny bit. I think I'm going to have to clean this up. And I'm going to look at this first before I trim all this. I just want to look at it. So now all that goes inside, just like that. I'm just looking to see if I caught the dress. Like, it looks really bad right now because none of those are clipped. So we're going to clip it and see how it did. So yeah, for my pattern recommendations, I always look to see if it is suited for my body type. I'm very hourglass. I have a sway back. I'm not incredibly tall or lean. I'm very curvy. And I look to see how many people have made it. I look to see what they complain about, if they complain about anything, so that I may be fine dealing with that complaint, but I also want to be aware of it before I start sewing it. Like, know what you're getting into. You've just spent, you know, $50 on the pattern and the fabric at the minimum probably, and you really want to, everyone wants you to be successful. The fabric store wants you to be successful. The pattern designer wants you to be successful. Your friends, your spouse, everybody wants you to be successful. So I think doing research and setting yourself up to be aware of what you're going to get into is just so important. So I'm just trimming this, and I'm making sure I'm not going to clip my dress. I'm not trimming this away, because you'll notice that this facing is basically the width of your seam allowances, and it'll fill it in. If you trim this down, you'll have a ridge in the middle. That's why I'm not doing that. My instinct is to trim the heck out of that. Okay, let's see. So now I'm just turning the corners. Yeah, this is the one I thought would be kind of my problem. So I did catch it right there. See that? I can tell I caught it because of that. Look at that right there. So we're going to just take out a couple of those stitches and see if that's it. It's just at my start stop, so that may be all I need to do. Yep, it's just that. See? It's releasing now. I'm going to take out one more stitch. We already went further than we needed to do to sew this little panel on. There we go. And then we hand stitch it shut. You iron it, then hand stitch it shut. I like using my awl as the corner turner. The seam ripper, a seam ripper, this right here on the seam ripper, this side right here, this long side on the inside, that's a blade. Don't use it to turn your corners. It's a blade. And I use a tapered tailor's awl, not the other, I don't know what the other one's called, but it looks like this. I actually have an extra tapered tailor's awl. There's another one that is really sharp, and it'll just go right through your fabric, and then you can't really grab it. You don't get much purchase. Okay, there we go. I don't like these puckers. They're really bugging me, so I'm trying to figure out. Let's see what it looks like on the other side. Oh yeah, I'm not. This side I can deal with. That side I can't deal with that. This side's fine. Some of these are because it's been turned right side out and inside out and stuff like that. So when it irons, it's going to relax a little bit. That, I'm not sure. I can't tell yet. Like, what is this? Oh, I see what it is. Okay. I think I fixed it. I didn't fix it yet, but I think I know what it is. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Let's see. Oh, I think it's just an optical illusion with the print. Jeez Louise, that print's really getting me. Okay. This is not my favorite fabric to do something like this in. I'm going to take out a couple more stitches. I could take out as much as I want. You could hand sew this whole waist panel, you guys. You do not need to machine stitch it, just so you know. But you know I'm a wimp when it comes to hand sewing. So then all of this gets underneath, just like that. And then you hand stitch it shut. And the reason why I like going that little extra corner is in that way my little corner's been started, which I kind of had to take it out a little bit on this one. So, oh well, it was a nice try. It's tricky to do and not always going to work out. So when you pin this, you want to make sure that this is all like open and everything, that you don't do too, like make this too small and then pin it like this, and then you'd have a buckle. You'd have this like buckle right there. So you want to make sure that your outer waist panel is as flat as possible and relaxed, and then pin this to fit it. No one's going to see the inside. Your grandma is not going to judge your sewing. Don't show it to her if you're worried she is. Does anyone's grandma teach them how to sew? Mine did. My mom did. Well, I learned in high school, I should say, and then my mom helped me a lot. And then she also had me start sewing for her. I always joke that she conveniently forgot how to sew, because then I could do it. See, and with hand sewing, you know, you can kind of make this, you spend your time taking these little this little like section here and getting it in there and getting it positioned right and then stitching it shut, you know. I'm trying to get rid of these threads though. I don't want those poking out. I want it to look as nice as possible. Just like that. I can hand sew it shut right now, you guys, but I can also just move on so we don't have to keep on this. The rest of the garment goes together really quickly. Has anyone else here made this? I really like the other one. It's so comfortable. I feel very statuesque in it. I am not a statuesque person. I really love it. I remember thinking the first few times I saw it, I was like, a Caftan? Wait. I feel like my mom wore those in the like 70s. My mom didn't, but I feel like that's what it was. What was happening in the 70s and stuff were Caftans, and I thought, well, I don't know about that. Is that really a trend right now? I'm terrible at trends. I may have gone to fashion school, but I'm terrible with trends. I'm the last to like jump on board. I'm more of a classic sportswear type of gal. And I remember thinking every time I saw a woman in it, I was like, oh my gosh, they're almost too beautiful. That's the thing. It's like, wow, they look gorgeous. I can't wear that. That's just like too much. And then I just decided that it was in my Needle Sharp subscription box, so I didn't really get a choice. And so it was really good. Like, I'm really loving that subscription box because it's making me sew a few things that I probably wouldn't normally have picked out, like South Bank sweater. I would never pick that out. All right, there's something going on right here. And it's this side. Yeah. I can't tell if it's the print or not. It's so close to the edge, but it's not straight enough. It's not straight enough, you guys. It looks straight on this side. It's not straight on the inside. I'm being picky. Is that okay? Gonna be picky. This fabric is getting really tired though. It does not want me to fiddle with it too much. See, when I turn it right side out, it's fine right there. It's not right there. I can't feel it in here. That's the one I sewed twice, isn't it? That's what it is, huh? It's the one I sewed twice. I'm going to take out, I know, this is dangerous. Warning, warning. I'm not going to go to the corners. I'm experimenting. I'm just seeing what's going on. It's a scientific experiment. It's all going to be fine. Let's see. Okay. I think what it is that the fabric created a little ridge when I sewed it again. I don't want it to do it again, so I'm like trying to get rid of it before I go. Oh, I just felt it. Okay, it's gone. See? Let's see. Yeah, see, Malin, I was worried too. Like, you know what I worry about is I don't want something to look maternity. And they posted a picture of someone wearing one that was pregnant just the other day. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad I did not see that before I finished mine. Oh, thanks, Rebecca. And I think I'm going to take this facing off right here, you guys. That's my pet peeve. I don't want something because I'm busty and I'm sway backed and I have like a little belly, so I don't want to look pregnant in something, and so that is always my fear, and I feel like that this one could look that way, you know. I think I got rid of it. It was like a little ridge in there. I could feel it after I got rid of it. Okay. Yeah. I just don't like how this print makes everything look crooked. You know? The print makes everything look crooked. Oh, well. Yeah, Malin, you know what I mean, right? Yeah, so that's my little pet peeve with things. I don't want to look pregnant in it. So sue me. Nothing wrong with being pregnant if you're not my age or you don't want to look pregnant in something or you don't want someone to ask you when your baby's due. So, but that dress it's one of those ones that when you wear it, you're like, oh, I don't really care what this looks like. It feels so good. It is so comfortable. Even if you just made one that you wore around the house, like, yeah, it's good. Okay, I don't want to get this ridge again, so I'm just going to be careful sewing my little facing on. We're just going to stay on the outside here. It wants to go back to doing that because it's already been sewn that way. That was a very, very, very tiny ridge. But I could tell it was something was up with it. Okay, I'm going to leave these threads right here because I did it just on the inside of the seam allowance that time for the facing. So that I didn't risk creating that little issue again on the outside. All right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Malin, I know. So, you know, it's like just know what your body type is like. I just learned that I was sway back. Now I talk about it all the time. You know, it's like my current thing. Use my awl. Pen is just not enough. See, now I'm missing that little corner bit I had to start my hand sewing with. Yeah, exactly, pumpkin seed, exactly. And you know, the person who asks that just feels terrible. You know, like they asked because they were pretty certain you were. So, you know, I'm gonna sew this a little bit more. It's too hard to start the hand sewing. The more you sew, the more thread you get there. So you gotta be really careful. I'm getting to that point. But I want this to be a little easier to hand sew shut. So I'm going to just put in a few more stitches at the corner there. Pushing it out of the way. Pulling and pushing. That's all we're doing in sewing, right? Pulling and pushing. Trying to stay just on the seam allowance of the original waistband facing. And I'm just going to turn the corner for maybe a couple stitches. I'm going to try. It's really tight in there. That way, that corner is taken care of. You know what I mean? And I kind of went into the seam allowance for that. But now I'm hoping that the the hand sewing will be a little easier to start like that. There. That. Get rid of the threads. So I went more on the inside of the seam allowance just so I didn't risk stitching onto the outside. So that's one way to do it. A seam halfway up to, I don't know, so like across the body, because I'm not a big fan of things like that either. All right. All right, that's better. We're on the right track now. See, now it just wants to kind of do it. So that's great. Let's see what it looks like on the outside though. Make sure I didn't catch it. There's a few pins there making it pull in. But now it looks narrower over here. Oh my gosh, you guys. This one is narrower now. By a little bit. Are you bored of me doing this? Yeah, I do a lot of higher waist things, like the Moneta dress. I love that thing. I love that because I have a narrow rib cage, and so I feel like it hits me in a really good spot. I'm gonna make a t-shirt out of that pattern, actually. Kind of funny, I know, but I'm gonna try and make this a tad narrower. Ooh, this seems really risky. Maybe I'll leave it. Maybe I will leave it. The optical illusion of this fabric print is bugging me. I kind of want to do it right here a little bit. See, the seam allowance is okay. Do you guys see what I mean? The optical illusion of this fabric print makes it look like it's straight or it's not. How about I set it aside? I'm going to set it aside right now and see how I feel about it in a little bit, because I feel like that's the best thing when you're kind of fussing and fussing and fussing. I need fresh eyes after a while. So, all right, let's move on to our neckline. It's the next thing. We have pockets in this dress too, which is really awesome. And so you're going to do the shoulders first. So typically, I don't need to use the patterns on the instructions on some patterns, because there's just a given order of operations to a garment, unless it has something special like this one, you know, with the waist detail. You want to see how they decided to sew it together and respect the way that they do it, so that you have the fewest problems as possible. But usually your first thing is your shoulder seams. You're going to do pockets, any like accessory things like the waist panel, darts, any of that stuff first. Then you're on to your garment construction, which is shoulders. And if there's sleeves, you would do your sleeves. It's easier to do things like your neckline, your collar, before you put your sleeves on, because then the garment is a little lighter to deal with. There's drama happening outside at the bus stop. There's a bus stop behind me. The shoulder's trying to stretch out because it's on the bias. You can see it. If you're unfamiliar with the bias grain line, it is the grain line that is anything not perfectly aligned with the selvage. So anything like, see, this one got a little off because the it's getting stretched, whereas this one's okay. Happens. So anything that's like 45 degrees or less, even, or more than to the length grain is going to be considered bias and stretchy. Because see, look, here's the cross grain, here's the length grain, and then if I go on the bias, it's stretchy. And so that's why sometimes your shoulders and your armholes have a lot of trouble lining up and things, because say you cut it out last weekend and you sew it this weekend, it's kind of relaxed over time. Maybe you've been handling it a lot because you're sewing other parts of your outfit or parts of your garment, and it gets a little fatigued. Then it will get a little stretched out in those areas. And armholes are notorious for that because the armscye, which is the curved part, the base of the armhole on the garment, is on the bias, and it can get stretched out. And it's the same with the cap of the sleeve. And you're already usually easing the sleeve into an armhole. So you would iron that. Look at my pattern matched up. Yeah, the thing with the higher waistline, Rebecca, is like the thing I only worry about is that I don't want to inadvertently make like something childish, you know, like a baby doll. Because like one of my Monettas I hemmed just above the knee, and because it's a high waist, it does look like a baby doll, especially since the fabric had jackalopes on it, so it was more of a novelty. And it's subtle, like the jackalopes are front and center, but it's funny, I don't think people notice it. Just the other day I was wearing that dress and someone said, "Is that jackalopes on your dress?" I was like, yeah, it is. I just love the colors of that fabric. That was like navy blue with these white jackalopes and little red and yellow flowers on it. I barely even noticed it was jackalopes. I'm so driven by color. So I'm trying not to stretch out the shoulder as I do this, because when you're doing your French seams, you really want this to be as flat as possible. You want this edge to be right up on top of itself, and so that you're not like pulling one side or the other, you know? I think when I started to sew without pins, it kind of made me a little bit better at being more confident, because I was like, I got this, you know, but it was hard. Okay, I'm going to stay stitch this neckline because this all in the bias. We don't want that stretching out. We don't want it to flare around we want it to sit flush. This is what the nightmare of this one was, you know, because you're attaching bias to it, and you can watch the video because it's kind of complicated to explain. It wants to flare out, and that's because the bias is sewn to the inside of the garment. I wasn't doing it on the edge like this, so it wanted to do this, and I was determined not to let it do that. I saw it was the #1 thing people complained about, that they didn't figure out in the sewing, and I was like, oh, I don't usually have that problem. I have some tips and tricks I do, and then I had that problem, and so I realized, like, oh, there's something else at play here, something I hadn't considered. And one very nice woman wrote, "It was really nice seeing you. I'm sorry that neckline was hard for you, but it's really nice to see how you troubleshoot it." So I'm really glad people weren't like, "Oh my gosh, stop talking about this neckline." But I started to forget you guys were there, and I just started to kind of nerd out in my head, like, ooh, wait a minute. There's got to be some like guaranteed ways to do this. And there are. It's just the fact that what I cut out to sew on my neckline in the way I wanted it to wasn't the way it needed to be cut out to do what I wanted to do. So it's possible. Making sure my seam allowance to my center front is going the way that I sewed it in at the waist seam. Okay, so I just kind of stay stitched around the neckline to give it more stability right there, just like that. Here's my facings. And I'm going to pretend that 2 of these are interfacing and the other one is the fabric. So when I don't have a notch on a pattern and I don't want to know the center, I just nip it. I nip the corner off. That's why you see those little triangles missing there. You know, actually, I think what I might do, do I want to do it this way? I'm trying to think the easiest way to do this. There's actually, there could be, I could actually finish this whole edge and then just top stitch it down. That sounds like a really easy way to do it. And then, yeah, let's try that. Let's see what happens. So if I were actually treating this as if it were, one was interfacing and one was the fabric, I would be laying the interfacing on the fabric and then treating that as it was one piece, correct? But in this way, I think what I'm going to do, since I am stitching my neckline facing to the outside of the garment, oh, there's a fabric flaw right there. I think what I'm going to do is finish the perimeter edge of the neckline facing by sewing and turning it, and then I'm going to just top stitch it down because I'm going to encase the neckline seam on the inside. And so this is also really great that we're using French seams, because the danger with doing this kind of neckline treatment that I'm going to do, because I'm going against the way the instructions are written, is that my little bit of this can show to the outside, right? Because what's happening is I'm going to sew my neckline facing on, and at my shoulder seam, it's actually going to come to the outside. The seam allowance is going to come to the outside of the garment, and I want to make sure that this right here wasn't a raw edge. So I'm going to try and finish it so that you're not going to see my seam, but it's thick, so there's a chance it will, sorry. And I think that if I'm just really careful and, you know, it is nice and finished, I think that we're going to get a nice look. Where's my other one? Here we go. Okay, so I'm just sewing the shoulders at 5/8 inch seam allowance. Doesn't matter, I don't need to do a French seam, and you shouldn't, it'll be too bulky. And then what I'm talking about is that I'm going to finish the perimeter edge of this. So I'm going to sew them right sides together. I'm going to start at the shoulder, just like this. And let's see, I'm actually just going to do it at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm pretty sure that's what the turn under allowance would be normally. I'm going to try not to stretch it out as I'm doing this, because some of this is on a curve, and I don't want it to be harder than it needs to be to attach to the dress. This is one of the other nice accents of this dress, is this neckline, and I think it's really flattering. I really love V-necks. They're kind of my go-to. That edge is, this is all potentially can stretch, so we're just going to be really careful. You really want this piece right here to be as symmetrical as possible, so be careful when you're going and turning your corners right here. Let's line that up. I think I'm about to run out of bobbin. Okay, now I'm going to just trim this so it's nice and smooth, because now I'm going to turn it right side out. And this right here is the edge that's going to be on the outside of the garment. I'm going to top stitch it down, and I'm going to clip this curve as well. I'm just inspecting it a little bit. So I'm going to clip these corners right here. And I'm just going to clip this curve right here. There's no need to clip straight sections, just the curve. You want to go right up to your stitching, almost like I'm about a fat 1/16 of an inch away. That's a little too close. You really need your clips really close when the curve is very sharp. And I know I've said this a billion times why you do this, but I'm going to say it again just in case. The reason you clip your curve is so that something has a nice smooth line when you turn it right side out, because when you're turning this edge, whatever it is, if it's a neckline, a collar, anything with a curve, the chances are this right here, this cut edge right here, where this is going to end up folding is right there, right? So it's lining up with that spot on the pattern piece. If you were to measure this spot that far away from the seam line and measure this one, they'd be different measurements. And so what you're trying to do is release the tension of that fabric so it can spread out or overlap and kind of, you know, like little flanges. And then that way you get a nice smooth curve because of that. Now, if you were to do your clips too far apart from each other, you might get kind of a stuttery curve, kind of like that, like as if you were trying to make a circle using only straight lines. Well, if the closer those straight lines are together, you know, that they overlapped, you get a smoother circle, right? So that's the same principle with your clips, is that you don't want them too far apart, you don't want them too close because it's just unnecessary. And you want that nice smooth transition. So you can always go back and clip more if you don't really like your transition. But it's all math. All of it is geometry and math, and it all makes sense when you think of it kind of in a spatial way. I'm going to iron this. I don't know if anyone saw, I got this new ironing board. It's like this wool felt thick pad. I agonized not even agonize over it, but I thought about it for a while. I love this thing. I'll show you. I'll turn my camera so you can see it. It's not like, it wouldn't replace a full-size ironing board, but I need a compact one here, and it works so great. I'm really loving it. So this little raw edge, we're going to sew this right sides together to our neckline, flip it to the out. We're going to sew it right side to wrong side from the inside of the garment, and then flip it to the outside. So I'll show you what I mean. And then we're going to top stitch this facing on the garment around the perimeter edge. How do we feel about this? See, it's already bugging me a lot less now that I haven't been staring at it. That's the trick. So yeah, so this is going to get just top stitched down. I did a different grain line to the garment. Just like that. I'm gonna pick my print so that I'm gonna pick the one that annoys me the least on the outside. So it gets like that, and then I'm gonna top stitch it down. This is actually, it looks a little better, I think. All right, so let's iron it. Let me see if I can turn my camera a little bit. See, I just have it on a shelf. This wool felt pad here. Can you see that? Really nice and thick. I'm just gonna iron this little edge that we just sewed, that nice curve. So that when we go to top stitch it down, it's really easy. It's a little harder to fix that once it's sewn down, so I'm gonna iron it beforehand. This also kind of helps calm this curve down. Like I really need to stay stitch this neck edge, the cut edge still. I should have done that before I started sewing, but I think in my head I was thinking I'd already done it because we had done it on the garment. This fabric, it's like dealing with a stripe that's not a stripe. You just never know what you're going to deal with a fabric until you've cut it and sewn it. And it's the same with chicken boot stuff. You know, we really think hard, or I really think hard about the fabric selection and the motifs that'll be on there. Is there a thread change, you know, between the binding and the, like a color change between the binding and the rest of the product? And, you know, is the bias going to work? And, boy, you think you thought of everything, and then you realize, like, there are unforeseen things that pop up, and you're kind of like, oh, shoot. I didn't think about that. All right, I'm going to stay stitch this. So here's my facing now. I'm just going to stay stitch this. I feel like French seams make a sturdier garment than serging. Isn't that funny? But I think it's true. There are certain things I don't like doing French seams on. Like, I'm like, oh, it's going to take forever if I do French seams. But most garments don't have as many seams as you think they're going to have. I'm going to try and get that point of that V in the right spot so that I can use it as a guide. When you're turning the corner of a V, you want that point right there to be directly under where the cut one is. And it's really easy. It's an optical illusion to go a little too shallow and then start there, and then your V point is off center. There are ironing boards in the same material. Really? Like a whole ironing board? Like a stand-up one? Interesting. Oh, I didn't know that. This looks like it was geared towards people who like applique and things and like do embroidery and stuff. Maybe quilters like it because it will hold their pattern pieces in place. So I'm really glad that, look at that. I don't know why that's a different width because our seam allowance was spot on over there. Look at that. It's like, that's the cut edge right there. So I'm going to trim that off. That's the side there. I'm going to make sure it's symmetrical now because I don't want this to be wider on one side than the other. Like if there's a little mistake like that, you might as well just go with it and then make the fix to the other one. It's not drastic enough to worry about. I'm not a couture sewer. You're going to learn that. Yeah, it's true, Malin. Yeah, and I feel like I don't use an industrial serger. I use industrial machines for everything but the serger and my buttonholer. And I do feel like the industrial serger does a nicer stitch, of course. And mine, even though it is perfect tension, perfect everything, wraps around the edge perfectly, really lines up on that cut edge, it snags. It gets snagged on things. And I don't like that, you know. All right. So let's see. We're doing this wrong sides to right. Wrong. This is the wrong side of your garment, and this is the, you want to put the right side of your facing, so to speak. And then it's going to turn to the outside, and that's the side that shows. So you want right side to wrong, to the inside, I should say. I'm going to start at the center back neck. My stay stitching on the center, the garment was a little wider than my facing, so I'm just going to be careful. You have your anchor points of your shoulder, so your seam to your shoulder. Just like that. What I love about stitching down a facing like they have you do in this pattern is that means the facing won't flip out to the outside, you know what I mean? No, just what you have. Oh, you mean the ironing board thing? Yeah. Yeah, I got this at Honey Run Quilters. Okay, so now I'm getting to my center front seam, and I really want this to be a nice V-neck. So I'm going to kind of look at it as if it's already sewn, just like that. This is the seam allowance of my French seam. That's why you're seeing it poke up like that. And where my needle is going to hit is the seam of the French seam. So the center front seam of the garment, this right here, that's where I want my needle to go in. That's the center of my V. That's the most important. You want your V to be centered on the garment. Okay, I got my shoulder seam. I'm really just letting the fabric tell me what it wants to do. Okay, I'm going to look at where my stitch line is before I start clipping and see how much of my stay stitch might be showing on the, oh, it won't matter. My stay stitch won't show on the outside because we're going to encase it, but there it is right there. So I'm just going to make sure I actually did get the edge. Like when I see a lot of that showing, I worry that my my piece slipped down and I didn't catch it all. So I'm just going to remove some of this. I actually don't mind removing all of my stay stitching sometimes, just so I make sure that none of it's going to show. Because I think I sewed it more like a 3/8, you know, and we don't want that. Wait, which one's my seam? Which one's my seam? Which one's my seam? Let's do it from this side. Here we go. See, we got rid of that. Yeah, so like I was saying, I'm not a couture sewer. I'm a let's get it done and be happy about what we sew. Let's troubleshoot it as we go, and we'll figure it out. And we're just going to go with what happens. And if something bad happens, we're going to make it into a really stellar design detail. Right? Okay, so you have to make sure that you clip the center front V right there. No matter where it ends up, you need to cut it. Make sure that that's... Oh, and I think I'm going to line it up a little bit better than that. I think I can get it a little bit better. So I'm going to take out a couple stitches right here before I clip it. Because there's my seam. So I want my V to line up with that. It's nice you have a seam as a guide, because V-necks are kind of hard to get centered. And they often look crooked. You'll actually notice a lot of store-bought V-necks are crooked. You're going to notice it now that I said that. These scissors they leave a little bit to be desired. I bought these from I thought a pretty reputable person, but they don't stay sharp. And good little scissors like this should probably stay sharper longer than they are. Okay, so we're going to trim or clip these curves here. And then we're going to turn it all to the outside, and we're going to top stitch it down. And then we have our pockets and our hems. I mean, like, that's it. This is a great, what is really great about this dress too is that, yeah, you have these two tiny bit labor intensive details, especially the waist panel, right? And then after that, you are done. Like, you just have like stuff you've done before. And so it's nice when you just have to spend your effort on a couple of labor intensive things, and then you can kind of, breathe a sigh of relief and relax, and you get your garment. you deserve it then, right? So I think trying to decide if I want to understitch this like this. I think I'm going to understitch. It's kind of a weird way to think of understitching, honestly. So it's going to flip to the outside just like this, and we're going to top stitch it down. Like that. What do you think? So I'm trying to decide, do I want to understitch this? I think I will. We'll see what happens. There's so many ways to sew something. There's rarely one right way. So I'm pushing the seam allowance to the garment. Keeping my garment up on the table. I think what I like about understitching is that I'm going to be able to really push those French seams into the body of the garment. That way, yeah, see, yeah, thank you. That way I have a better chance of them not peeking to the outside. So here I'm going to come across one right here. And when I get up here, I'm really going to push it down and flatten it as best I can like this. I'm pulling it into the garment. This is not the, prescribed method of sewing the neckline. I just really wanted a design detail because of this fabric was so simple. Now I know the stripes are really, dominating a little bit. So here's this other shoulder seam right here. I'm really going to flatten it and put it into the garment side. Typically I start and stop seeing the shoulders when it's at the neckline so that it doesn't show at the center back. All right, so let's top stitch this down. So now the facing, yeah, see, look at that. That really was a good idea. That rolls it into the inside, just like that. And I probably could have understitched the this one here, right here. But I was feeling like it would be a little too much stitching on that edge because we're going to top stitch it as well. So I'm just going to roll it under there as I top stitch it down, just to ensure it stays under there. I'm going to line my shoulders up just like that. Use my anchor points of my shoulders as my starting and stopping pinning points. Because I know I want those to go there. And then it all needs to fall into place after that. Just making sure I'm not getting any extra fabric under there. Okay, I'm taking the pin, grabbing it, and I'm kind of pushing it like this under there. Just like that. Let's get rid of this thread here. These little threads are poking out. We're going to get rid of them right now so we don't forget and we end up wearing them with them. They're just like little pieces of the fabric thread. This fabric kind of frays the more it gets handled. I think it looks pretty good. Like I like the facing on the outside. At certain angles, this looks blacker than others. It's kind of funny. Do you guys notice that? Can you guys see that? See in the camera, this looks much blacker than this, and in person, this looks more faded than this. I don't know. Looking for something to put under. When I'm pinning things, sometimes that's what I do. I put something under it so then I can pin against it like that. I usually put my see-through ruler because it's flat, but I think I stole it. Oh no, there it is. It's on my desk. So let's make sure we're getting this in the center. Look at that. So doing 2 layers of fabric does make it a little thicker. Definitely a certain kind of look. So if you didn't want it as thick as mine's looking, you could have just used interfacing and the fabric, not the, yeah, optical illusions again, exactly. Not 2 layers of fabric, but I do tend to not use interfacing, you guys. Like, I'm trying to be the best sewist for you and do especially what's called for in a pattern. Because sometimes using your outside, your regular fabric, I call it self, sorry, it's an industry term. If you use your regular fabric, sometimes that's not ideal. Like this one I was a little worried about because of the motif of the fabric showing through different layers. Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted the stripes to be a different direction. That's why I did it. And I literally saw someone do this. And you know, I think that the person I saw that did this wasn't even on this garment. They did it on the Tea House dress by Sew House 7. Tea House dress by Sew House 7. That's right? I've made that dress. I love that dress. I'm definitely going to make another one soon because I just couldn't decide on my fabric. And then it just hit me the other day what I'm going to do. I think I have enough. I don't know. May have to be a little bit shorter of a dress. And that's what she accidentally sewed her facing to the outside. And then she was like, I'm going to consider it a design detail. And that's exactly, I like going with the flow like that. And I was like, oh, I could do that on that Charlie. All right, let's stitch this puppy down. See, this is nice when the sleeves, the underarm isn't sewn yet to do this. Don't put this off to the end because you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. Do this before your underarm and your pockets are in because then your garment can lay flat on the machine and you don't have to worry about all of the dress getting in the way and accidentally sewing it because that, you don't need that. You don't need that frustration. I'm pushing my fabric under so it doesn't poke out because I should have understitched it. It would be a lot faster and easier if I had understitched it. So this is where you're going to notice if your machine has a quirk like it pushes the fabric away from you as you're sewing. Like sometimes it's not you guys. Sometimes it's your machine. Like my machine has a lot of pressure in the presser foot and I like it that way. But it does mean sometimes it's going to push my work away from what I'm sewing when it's a lightweight fabric compared to what I usually sew with on this machine. How's it looking? Oh, it looks okay. Let's make it sure. You really want the fabric to be as relaxed as possible. You don't want to inadvertently stretch something or pull something or rearrange it. Well, it was really cute when I left today. My husband said, are any of you guys the Princess Bride fans? He said, have fun streaming the castle. I was like, what? What'd you say? You did say that. That's pretty cute. Okay, this is, I'm going to run out of bobbin thread. Watch. Right at the V. I better not. Okay, this is my showpiece spot. This is where everyone's going to be looking. I want to make sure I'm getting it nice. That's why I'm probably going to run out of bobbin thread right now. Pivot. I'm so paranoid. I thought I heard it run out. I'm like, oh, I was just... Oh, I did! Oh my gosh. I knew it. I knew. I should have just switched it. Hindsight, right? Well, I always have another bobbin wound. That's the benefit of an industrial machine. Yeah. Oh, man. Okay. There's a little bobbin winder on the side of my machine. How annoying. All right, well, at least the thread is not too different. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to back it to like right here. I'm going to stick to a spot that's in the white section for my back tack. I knew it. I could hear it. I was so paranoid. What is that? Oh, it's a little piece of thread. Okay. Caught in my stitching. Okay, I'm going to try and line up in my needle holes there. Okay. Well, at least that time my corner lined up well. Well, if you ever meet me and I'm wearing this dress, you're going to be like, oh, I remember when your bobbin ran out right there. You just gotta laugh about that stuff. We don't do this because it's faster. We do this because it's an experiment. We want to try. We want to learn things. We want to enjoy things. We want to be a maker. We want things to fit us right. And probably that last one the most, right? Voila. What do you guys think? Looks good. Yeah, it does look good, huh? I like it. I like that it's soft here. I could put another row of stitching there, but I think I'm going to leave it. I like the softness there. When I sewed my other version of this and I did the facing the way they recommend, I got some torquing right here. And you do stitch the facing to the garment. You just do it on the inside. And we removed it and got rid of that torquing because we just say no to torquing in this stream. Torquing is the bane of our sewing existence. It makes us look like we don't know what we're doing. Okay, we got our pockets. All right, I'm going to admit that I'm not the best at sewing inseam pockets on a with a French seam. And I may have to think about it for a second. Like, I wouldn't even normally do this section with the French seam, you know, but I'm trying to. Thanks, you guys. So let's see. I'm going to think about this. I think I want to go this way first. Let me try one. Line up my notches. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm not going to back tack this first one. I'll go back and do it. Then I do that. And then that's my, yeah, that's what you want. Okay. It's a little confusing, admittedly. And like I say, I don't hardly ever do French seams on inseam pockets, just because typically it just doesn't, I'm not doing it, I don't happen to be doing it on a garment with them. Not because I avoid it, and I'm going to say something about a lot of patterns these days don't draft the inseam pockets properly. Like these, this is nothing against this pattern company. This is a very accepted way to do it. But typically an inseam pocket, there would be a little excess sticking out right here to sew the pocket onto. And then that way your seam of your inseam pocket goes to the inside of the garment. Hi, Janice. Oh, the fabric. Maybe Rebecca can tell me what this fabric is. Exactly, Rebecca. It's an ikat, so this is woven into it. Maybe Rebecca can tell me, she's in the stream here, who it is. I should start writing that stuff down. I'm really sorry. I'm really bad at that. I do know it with some of the quilting cottons and the prints because of what we use here, but it was just something they had there that I thought I just liked. I wanted something kind of simple. You know what I mean? I tend to pick things that are bright and printed, obviously, you know, so this isn't bright and printed. Okay, so I'm going to, so we're doing French seam, side seam pockets. I don't even know if I've ever done them properly like this with just with the opening as well in the French seam. I usually skip this step. I just sew it right sides together and call it good. So now my pocket is totally, and now it's ready to sew the rest of it as a French seam. Waiting for the bobbin to, I try not to wait for it to run out. I try to avoid it running out. So how did I do that? I did it wrong sides together first, right? Correct? Like literally one to the next. I've already forgotten how to do it. It's sometimes why I get kind of confused is because as a pattern drafter, there's certain ways that most people will draft their patterns in the garment industry, and it's a little different in home sewing. And so I have to sometimes remember how to sew it that way. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just not maybe what I need to do. And I've been out of the garment industry for a while. I've been, you know, doing my own line of things, you know, the bags and things. So trends change even in pattern drafting, just like in sizing. We've all noted that sizing, we had that term vanity sizing come up about 15 years ago, and that was threw me for a loop. And by the way, that all happened, that and low-rise jeans all happened while I was pregnant. And when I came back from having my kid and trying to find some clothes to wear, I was like, what is wrong with all of the pants, and why are they, because when low-rise pants came out, they were low. They were not like high hip, you know, like they are now. I was like, what happened to the world while I was pregnant? I've been gone for 9 months. I felt betrayed. All right, did I do this the same on both sides? Oh, good. Okay, I'm doing one whole side first so that I can know that I did it right. So I'm doing this wrong sides together. I'm sorry this fabric doesn't look like wrong sides when I'm doing it. Wait, that is the wrong side, right? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, it's not. Wait, that's the wrong side. Right. Yeah, okay. Wrong sides. This better, I better be doing this right. Does anybody know? Help. Okay. I'm hoping by watching me troubleshoot, you can understand, like, it'll make more sense to you when you're doing it because you'll see the why it worked that way. I'm not afraid to try things. I'm not afraid to fail. It happens every day. I don't care anymore. It's how I got my skills. My pockets aren't lining up perfectly. So I'm going to go just to the left of my French seam there. Turn. It's a wee bit messy right now, right there, but we're going to clip that and then it's going to lay flatter. I hope. That's my plan. I kind of looked at how one person does this because I wanted to know what my plan was actually going to work. But I don't ever just trust the way other people do it just in case I think differently. And so I try and do a run through. I know I'm subjecting you to my run through, but it doesn't sink in until I do it myself. It's why I try and, sew multiples of the exact same thing a few times to understand the skill and get it. When I design a product here at Chicken Boots, we have to sew it a lot before it goes into production. And before I decide on it at all, I've sewn it, 4 to 15 times, depending on what it is. And even then, it'll get into production and there'll be something that we didn't anticipate. So when you're garment sewing, you don't get that benefit. It's like, how many, Charlie Caftans do you really want in your wardrobe? You might want a lot of them, but you may not want such a unique piece of a garment in your wardrobe multiple times. So if you're only going to get one time to do it, it's asking a lot of you as a sewist to be really good at a garment you've never made before. So you have to cut yourself some slack when you're doing that, So sometimes you might want to sew a section of it a few times, like the fly zipper on the ginger jeans, That's why I sewed a bunch of those. Like, I hadn't sewn one in years, so I wanted to make sure I was going to do it correctly. I didn't want to tell you guys incorrectly. I'm going just one stitch past that seam there. Actually, I shouldn't go one stitch past that seam now. So I am doing that wrong. Because I forget, this is a French seam. That's not the finished, that's the finished spot. I think I did that up there too, so let me fix that really quick. It's not going to line up at first. Yeah, so it's okay up here because I'm a little, I could be like an 1/8 of an inch less here, but so I have a bigger seam allowance there. That's fine. I'll trim that. But here on this inverted curve, we just want to stick to our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And it may be below the seam. This is like very tricky to work with. I think there could be a better way to do it. I could have trimmed or clipped it first, but I'm not clipping it until I know where my pocket's going to be. Okay, so now we're going to clip into that this isn't really a corner, it's like an inverted corner. Put this right here because otherwise you cannot sew it correctly. Oh, I feel like I'm doing this wrong. Wait a minute, I have to think about this. Wait a second. You know what? When I sew that way, that's the right, yeah, that's the, oh, that's the wrong side. Okay. Okay, sorry guys. Every time we sew French seams, I do this to you guys. I'm like, am I doing this right? Oh, you're not there at the shop. Okay, sorry, Becca. Okay, I'm just going to trim this edge, make sure that it's down to that 1/4 inch seam. Get rid of all these little furries. We don't need any fuzz. And I'm going to use my rotary knife, actually, if I can find it. I'm just going to grab my rotary knife really quick and just do it like that. It'll be a little better. they are counterintuitive, exactly. You always cut using your rotary knife with the fabric to the blade side, not this side. You want to be able to see where your blade is. I have to use the iron to hold it down, otherwise it wants to move. Yeah, Rebecca, I was thinking, is it it's not the luminous line? Is that Anna Maria Horner's line when she did, this isn't from that, right? What is all that? Okay. I'm going to do one. I'm going to keep going on this one and just make sure I did this whole thing right. Yes, I am doubting myself. That's what we do, right? We doubt. Some pocket. So doing the underarm seam of this garment creates the sleeve opening right there. So then once your pockets are done, your side seams, all you have left is to hem the sleeves and hem the dress. So pretty quick after that. If you weren't yapping along like I am or figuring it out on the fly, it's pretty quick sew. Okay, so the reason we clipped it is so we can get in here. We can make this corner right here. Just like that. Right, one on top of the other. This is a thread. I thought at first it was a raw edge, but it's just a thread. It's where I sewed my first seam. And I'm feeling my cut edge in there because I really want to make sure I encase it. This fabric gets a little bit more fiddly the more it's worked with. But I really like it. It's nice and simple. Like I said, I always keep the garment up there unless it has to, you know, position-wise be on my lap or something. But I try and keep all of that up there so I'm not like managing that with my hands. It's not pulling against your needle. That's dangerous for your machine and you. And it also is fighting your sewing. When your garment is pulling on your needle, it's slightly bending it. And then as it's slightly bending it, when it goes down into the hole to meet up with the bobbin thread, it can be misaligned. And then if you nick the thread hook, that's a really expensive part, by the way, and hard to replace. You can get your timing off, and you can also get a barb on that hook, and then you might break threads a lot. So there's a lot of consequences for your needle being pulled on and things like that. You just want to make sure that you just let your machine do the job. Sorry for the lecture. when I have to get a mechanic, he has to drive an hour and a half to me, spend the day here or whatever time, and then drive back. Like that's what I'm up against. So I really don't want to have a mechanic come here. I have him come often for a tune-up. And on my old machine, before I got this brand new one, I was having him come at the least twice a year. Those visits cost me about $300 a piece. He would do 3 machines though, so 3 machines. And that's if I wanted another throat plate or bobbin case or whatever, there'd be that. But after a while, I was like, this machine's starting to need more and more. Not this one, but the other one. It was starting to need more and more mechanic time, and I started realizing, boy, 3 or 4 visits, I'd have a brand new machine. And so and then the machine blew. So I was like, perfect, I'm getting a new machine. So it is something to think about, because regularly maintaining your machine makes it last a lot longer. And I know I sound like the dealer when I say that, but on your home machine, you can do a lot to maintain your home machine yourself. All right, you guys, let's see how I did. I don't know why I'm still doubting it. I know it's done, but I want to see what it looks like. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that looks good. So yeah, I totally recommend learning how to maintain your machine, especially oiling it. That's so important, oiling your machine. Mine sits, like if I tilted my machine head back, I push really hard, it tilts back like this. It's sitting in a pan of oil. So I can't just move my machines around because they have to stay perfectly level anytime I'm moving them. Here's my pocket right here. Totally invisible. There we go. Yay, pockets! We're the pocket brigade. All right. Now, how did I do that? I'm going to do this one wrong. Watch. Okay. Wrong sides together first. Always, correct? Okay. I'm going to be better about my seam allowances this time. The one thing I'm worried about with this dress is how it's going to fit me in the back. I have a feeling it's going to pool on me because of my sway back. And there's no like back waist seam to do like a horizontal dart, because that would be the best thing to do. Maybe a shaped dart. Pockets on each side. Yeah, of course. I sometimes will only put one pocket on one side, and it's because the dress wasn't designed to have pockets, and I put a side zipper on the other side. And I've put pockets in with the side zipper, but I don't really want that bulk pulling against the invisible zipper. So sometimes I just put one on my right hand side, because usually your zipper is on your left, because they tailor that for right-handed people so you can reach over. And so I just put my pocket on my right-hand side if the pattern didn't come with one. Look at all this haircut it needs. This fabric is just starting to like really unravel before our eyes. But that's what these are typically considered akin to a hand woven. I used to work at a fabric store, and she specialized in imported fabrics, Guatemalans, and things like that. You'd think I'd know more about them. But I was kind of young, young and dumb. But that's really where my sewing got sparked. It was interesting, the way she had you apply for a job there was she gave you a bag, like the bag that when you got a purchase, and you got your item in a bag or whatever. And it was like this really faded floral print on the bag. They actually smelled kind of funny. And she would give you one of those bags. It was like this, like 8x9 or something. It's an Andover fabric, part of the Dreamweaves line. Honey Wrinkles can ship in the US. Okay, perfect. So Janice, I think you're the one who asked about the fabric. So Rebecca says that it's an Andover fabric, part of the Dreamweaves line. This one right here. So she would give you this bag, and then she would say, all right, make something with this bag and bring it back. And that was your application to work at the fabric store. And I was like, okay. And I didn't have a job. I just moved to town, and I'm a go-getter. So I was like, cool, something to do, And I'd never made a quilt before, but I decided that I was going to make that bag into a quilt. And I came back, I went back the next day, and I said, can I have another one? They were like, no one's ever asked for a second bag. And they thought that it's because I had made a mistake. And I just said, I just need more. And so they gave me another bag, and I made a little quilt, little tiny quilt. And I sewed a part of the bag on the back as a pocket. So it was actually a quilt that you could put something inside. And then I quilted the top of my resume to match, and I turned it in. I'm an overachiever. I get it. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, for doing that. Yeah, anyway, they weren't hiring at the time, but I got the job. And my mom, I gave that little quilt to my mom, and she framed it and hung it on her wall. And it really is kind of cute. I kind of wish I had it. Did I just do that wrong? How many times have I asked you guys if I just did that wrong? It's not easy sewing and talking and being performance, All right, so we're going to do wrong sides together first. And then right sides. Look at this fabric. It's just like shedding everywhere. We need to get it sewn quick. There are other fabrics in this line, Janice, that are really cute. It was actually kind of hard to decide. I picked the most boring of them all, but there was a couple that I really liked. I'm trying to make this seam right on top of the other one. You can see I'm a little bit off right there. We're just going to even that out. I'm going to come down one stitch past the seam that I already sewed. And then I'm going to the shorter one because that's the one if I went to this one, I wouldn't catch that in there. Sticking to my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to try and even that discrepancy out now by kind of lining these back up. Pockets are very loosey-goosey. They're almost entirely on the bias. So you got to be careful. I think I got my last watermelon of the season like a couple weeks ago, or like a week and a half ago. If I'd known it was my last one, I would have bought another one. I eat a lot of watermelon. Watermelon for life. But now there's pumpkins there, I probably, you guys are going to think I'm crazy, but I probably ate at least 25 whole watermelons, large size, all by myself this summer. I love it. If I need a snack, I have watermelon. If I'm craving something sweet, I have watermelon. If I don't want anything at all, I eat watermelon. I eat it for dinner. I even have a piece with breakfast. I love watermelon. It's not for everybody, I know. But I feel like now it's like the long period of time without watermelon. Okay, I just did that wrong again. Remember when I told you I don't want to go past this part right here? I don't need to. I'm going to do that on the final seam. If I left that in there and then did my French seam, in light of this seam, the pocket opening is getting smaller and smaller. So I just want to fix that. I keep forgetting we're doing a French seam. And I'm talking and entertaining myself and you. There we go. I just need to get a little bit started, then I can get it up. There. It just proves you can do French seam inseam pockets. They're just, you know, kind of mind-bending to think about. So I'm just going to follow my seam allowance there. Right here. I'm following the seam allowance of the side seam, rather. So that's what I want to sync up with. Like, so it's not the inside of this line, it's this one here I want to think about. Because I'm going to do that on the last pass of the French seam. I feel like I'm explaining that really badly. And it's so hard to see on this white fabric. But your French seam is 2 seams. And the first one is not the final seam. So you need to sew it thinking about where the final one's going to be. That makes sense. Yeah, that is an awesome way to get a job, Rebecca. It was pretty cool. And it was really funny because she gave back my little bag when I got the job. She's like, oh, here's your thing. I thought you'd want to keep it. And I was like, oh, thanks, you know. And then I gave it to my mom and whatever. And, like, I don't know how long later, but she asked for it back. I was like, oh, sorry, I gave that to my mom. It's framed on her wall. And she was like, yeah, but you made that for me. I want it back. I was like, you tell my mom. Oh, doing that. I'm going to clip this right now. Okay, so I missed that right there. When I took that out, I missed that. Let's fix that. It's always good to check your work. It felt kind of funny down there. It's probably because my pocket originally was misaligned. I want my seams to go. I want to make sure they're going to the inside. Yeah, just like that. There we go. That looks better. We'll get rid of all that excess. I'm going to clip to this pivot point. Oh yeah, that's the fabric. Okay. I thought that was like cut edge right there for a second. It's that optical illusion thing again. Okay. And then we're going to clip on this one as well. You want to be really careful when you're cutting over this really thick spot, especially if your scissors are a little dull. You may end up squeezing so hard you'll go right into your seam. So you want to be careful of that. Yeah, exactly, Rebecca. I mean, I love, spinach and watermelon salad. Oh, I don't eat feta. It's like one of the, yeah, it's a food that will trigger me. But, watermelon for life. Yeah, and my family doesn't eat watermelon. Like, it's all mine. I have this whole method. I get it. As soon as I get it, I cut the whole thing up. Like, I quarter the watermelon, and then I slice it in the watermelon quarter, and then down the middle, and then I scoop out all those triangles and just put them in a bin. And then I can just open the bin and have a triangle of watermelon anytime I want. I give my chickens the rinds. They eat them down to it being a paper-thin green, like, thing. The rind is just, like, gone. They eat all of it, even the white. They love it. They expect it now so much so that they're kind of surprised this time of year when I'm like, I'm sorry, girls, I don't have any more watermelon for you. I'm just as sad as you are. They're like, I don't want spinach. I want watermelon. Chickens are funny. They have a sweet tooth. They love fruit and seeds, things like that. Yeah, I feel like it's one of those foods that's like, I was about to say coriander. What's the cilantro? Cilantro and coriander are the same herb. I get them confused sometimes. Like some people think cilantro tastes like soap. it's like a thing, you know? I love cilantro. It doesn't taste like soap to me. It's getting rid of all that bulk. We're going to go back and encase our seam here. I keep thinking like that's the cut edge of the fabric, but it's not. It's really tricking me. I'm trying to get it down to that 1/4 inch seam allowance so I don't have to worry about it when I go back to do the 3/8. Let's do it. And then we only have hems. You guys have been so patient. It's taking me forever to sew this thing. I'm just trying to do a good job, you know. I'm really glad we walked away from our waist panel when we were starting to get a little fussy, meaning me. I know, it's getting really fussy with it. And it isn't perfect, but I think I just needed to walk away from it and see, is it really going to bug me later on? Am I going to notice it? Because I think like sometimes when we look at things, we first we have an expectation of what we want it to look like, you know, and then it doesn't look like that. Because in our mind, we think of it as like this perfect little geometric thing when fabric is not that. It's much more loosey, you know? So I think it's better to put it away, not when after you've been obsessing over it a little bit, put it away before it's too late, and then come back and look at it as if you were your best friend looking at it or another sewer and they're like, it looks great, you know, like, what are you thinking, you know? No one's going to stare at it and critique it. Like I always say, we're not entering this in the fair. Our sewing teacher's not going to see it. Wearing it and being done and moving on to the next fun project, that's where it's at. We don't need to be too frustrated. I have thrown things in the trash, you guys. Like, I have made horrendous mistakes. I make mistakes every day, all the time. I'm going to check to see if this is trimmed enough right here. Oh, it's just a piece of fabric sitting there. That's why. I could feel something in there. I still feel something in there. Let's look at it. Oh, yeah. So our little, like, our pieces of our seam allowance there are coming out because we clipped it. You know? That feels way better. Okay. Carry on. Carry on. We sew because we want to figure it out. We want to make things. We want to be more mindful of our clothing. We want it to fit well. We want it to fit well. We want it to fit well. So, we are all not garment sewers in a factory somewhere. We do not need it to be a certain thing. And they're garment workers in a factory. Oh, bye, Millen. Thanks for coming. You know, they're not sewing things from start to finish. They're only sewing one little step. They're only sewing side seams or shoulders or something like that. Yes, you taste like Lexi. That's so funny. Happy sewing, Millen. We only have our hems left. So I made a little funny photography area in my shop so I can try and get more finished pictures of me wearing things that we've sewn together. It's been the hardest part, especially if someone's not around to take a picture. So I'll try that today and use it. Okay, getting around to this corner here, making sure my pocket's flat. One side's not like gaping more than the other, like this side to this side over here, because that's when you notice your pocket when it doesn't hang nice and seamless on your body, is if one side is tighter than the other. And so I'm just trying to keep this directly centered on top of itself. The seam's right on top of itself. I'm going to go one stitch past the seam, turn the corner. Okay. So I noticed that that Love to Sew podcast is having like, I think October is like coat month for them. And Rebecca and I are going to sew that Tamarack by Grainline Studio. And they're having like a sew along with it. So I think all the stars are aligning. If anyone wants to participate, we have our own little unofficial sew along with the other sew alongs. So, okay, so let's see how our dress is looking. I'm probably gonna get to wear this like maybe once or twice. Maybe if I wear a little sweater over it because it's short. There's our pocket. Look for all those threads. This fabric really wants to be thready. It looks cute. I'm into it. What do you think of the waist, guys? It's not bugging me now. Like if I look for it, I can see it, but it's not bugging me. We're moving on. We're doing hems now, baby. We're going to be done. I'm going to go with the prescribed hem. If it's too long, I'll just hem it later. But I want to finish this with you guys. What you look for in a hem is you really want the side seam. You want all the seams to match. And you also really want the right angles. At any seam transitions, you want right angles. Because otherwise you get points. Like you get points like this or points like this. It's really important to get those right angles. And that is something I look for in patterns. Right angles at the underarm seams, side seam. It's important. Because if you have a point, then it's going to be hard to sew something else to it. You'll have to cut the point off or dip down and you lose some seam allowance. So seam transitions are important. And that's what I'm looking for right now because I could just start hemming. But if, like this was off a little bit, like my other one I think is, it would be hard to fix that as I'm going. I'm just going to cut all these little threads off though, because I'm going to do a rolled hem. And I don't want those fighting me right now. Stay there. There we go. Last one, and then we'll hem. Done is better than perfect, Janice. You are right. That's how I feel about it too. Because sometimes done is perfect. I really believe that you need that sense of accomplishment to keep going, you know? And if you really don't like sewing something, you don't have to finish it. What I like about knitting is you can just unknit all the threads. See that right there? I'm going to smooth that out like that. For the most part, you can with knitting. See how there's a little bit of a gentle point right there? Like, just because that's sewed together and everything, you can't hem it like that. Like, it's going, you're going to have to smooth it out somehow. So the best thing to do is to just try and smooth it out and get your right angle at the seam line like that. It'll be a lot easier to hem once you're there. Those underarms are tricky. I'm trying to work on how I explain things and trying to be clear and simplifying things. I'd like to do some pattern drafting streams with you guys. And so I think once I get better at explaining how I'm doing something or why I do something, it'll be better when we do the pattern drafting. I'm hemming it, Rebecca. I'm hemming it. all these threads, man. Oof. I need them out of my way. That's the front. So this one I want to go like this. Okay. And then this one to the back. Just making sure I'm pushing my seam allowances consistent with where I did in other places. Almost there. This is the back, correct? Correct, wait. At the front. Yeah, that's the front. Okay. Just making sure. Got my seam allowance going the same way. Yep. Sometimes just go with when like originally I pressed it, I go with the way it naturally wants to fall, which kind of helps later on because it'll be in the same place at the bottom probably too. Trim your threads right away. This thing's getting thready. Yeah, absolutely, Janice. Like I feel like even if we just went over why patterns are marked the way they are or how to add seam allowance, I feel like just learning how to add seam allowance, even if you never do that, will make you understand why a pattern is the way it is. I really think anyone would get something out of it no matter what your level of sewing is, because it's like anything. Once you learn why it's done that way, it makes it so much easier to figure out how to use it, right? So it wouldn't be an advanced thing at all. Like I know that wouldn't be the way to go. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna start at the underarm. Yeah, and then once we have a few, pattern drafting like skills and awareness under our belt, then we can learn to add pockets to something if we want pockets, or add a facing if we don't want to do bias trim like on the tunic number 1, Those are really simple, basic things that are really versatile and useful. Like, the easy, simple things you do are sometimes the most useful things. You don't need to know how to make princess lines in a bodice that has darts, Like that's kind of stretching where that pattern was to begin with. But hey, that dress could use some pockets, right? Or how to add just a patch pocket. And why you would do it and how you would do it and how you would position it, what the seam allowance. It's a very simple thing, but really useful. And then sizing. Like the one thing I think everyone can get something out of is, how do I grade this to my size? I really want to buy that pattern, but that pattern company didn't come in my size. I really want to grade it up or down to my size. And that kind of thing, that is a little bit more advanced, but we can look at it in a really logical and simple way and even try and apply those techniques to something that make more sense and are more basic to begin with. Anything that makes sewing more pleasurable, more logical and simple I think is a win-win for everybody. Just getting rid of some threads here. You know, patterns, like really long time ago, I want to say like in the early 1900s, they were like in like magazines, and it was literally a schematic of the pieces on a grid of paper, and you had to scale it up yourself in real life. I actually have some books, like old-fashioned books like that, for costume making, because they make it so that you don't have to buy printed patterns. And then what you relied on was your friends, you know, like other people who had sewing knowledge, and you're like, is this working for everybody else? Just like we do. There were patterns that had errors and things, so they had less to go on. They didn't have Instagram. All right, guys, voila, she is complete. A little bit of ironing, I'll make this look really good, but I have to admit, I kind of like the washed, relaxed nature of this fabric. I kind of want it to be that kind of easy to wear thing. Because it's so shapeless in the back, I have a feeling that it's going to do this on me. Let me show you. It's going to do this on me. But we'll see, right? And maybe if there's enough room, I can make a little fisheye dart right there. Because I think a horizontal dart would be a little weird. But this is what my body needs, is a little horizontal dart right there. So we'll see. So, all right, guys, I'm going to do my best to take a picture and try it on and see how it goes. And I have my raised neckline that's about 2 inches higher, because it would have been about down to here. Put my facings on the outside and on the cross grain, and I used the self fabric, the original fabric, as interfacing in there, so there's 2 layers, and I put this on the cross grain as well. The last thing I have to do is hand stitch this shut, which we could probably do that right now. If you guys are up for it, you can leave if you want. But I'm just going to hand stitch this shut. You can see my terrible hand sewing skills. There's going to be like 4 people in this stream that know how to hand sew better than me, so listen to them. But hey, you can see there's more ways than one to skin a cat. Oh, what a terrible, what a terrible expression. So I used to work at this place. I didn't work there. My office was inside this building that was like an incubator for garment and sewing related businesses. There were all kinds of things. How long is what? Oh, the dress? It's short. Oh, it's inside out, but I'll show you. So, it's not too long. And it's pleated in the front. You see these pleats right here, Janice? You were there when I sewed the other Charlie, weren't you? And it was long, had side slits, and it was gathered right here, not pleated. Pretty sure you were there. I'm going to put this behind it. This little notebook, isn't it cute? I do that. So I have something that I don't sew onto other things, you know. Sew onto the fabric that's underneath. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty short. It's not like short. I'm not very tall. I'm like 5'4"-ish. 5'4" plus-ish. Oh, good, Rebecca. You should. You've got the greatest frame for this dress. It would look gorgeous on you. So I'm just gonna pin a few places here. This is a bummer that this one didn't work out, because now I have to fuss with it. So yeah, anyway, I used to work at this place where I rented an office inside of a incubator, and so it allowed like affordable rent for a lot of us that had garment related businesses. They had a few garment related businesses in that county, so they were trying to encourage us. And The other really interesting thing they had there was a workforce training program for people that were trying to learn another skill or something. And so there were lots of people, like all kinds of people there that had interesting skills and learning new things. But I met a bunch of Hmong women, and I don't know if you know much about Hmong culture, but the Hmong were displaced in their country, so their country just no longer exists. So the Hmong people had nowhere to go, and there's quite a few of them in the county where I used to live. And they are incredible hand sewers. They do amazing embellishment and handwork. And I learned some really interesting sewing tricks from watching a couple of them. I didn't get to spend a ton of time with them. And one of them, like if they were sewing a button on, they would put like 8 strands of thread through the needle and then sew the button on in just a couple of swipes. Rather than us going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, they would minimize that by putting more strands of thread through the needle. I thought that was a big no-no, but I started thinking about like, why is that such a big no-no? The other thing I learned was, I'm pretty sure I learned from them, like when I start sewing or hand sewing, I don't tie a knot. Okay, here's another thing they showed me. That when they thread the needle, they put 2 ends through. Like but just a second ago, I had 1 strand of thread through the needle, and it was, then my needle went to the fold of the thread down there, right? So I had 2 strands going. But what they will do also is they put both strands, I hope I can get it through the eye of this needle. This needle's kind of a small eye. They get both threads through, and they leave that cut edge, so that's my cut edge. And then the loop is down here. And then they go through, go down to the loop, and go through it like that. Then they don't tie a knot. And in certain places, that's really great because there's less bulk. But the other way to do it is I sometimes don't tie a knot. I just do a few passes like this, and then that's how I secure it. So I'm going to start. This is where it starts. What I like to do when I want it to be kind of, I don't care if this is that invisible, you guys. I'm not going to do beautiful hand stitching. But what I will do is the best I can, you know, and I want it to be secure because I'm really hard on my clothes. I'm just going to do this. I fold it like this. That's a little far from the edge. I just pinch it from the inside. So I'm grabbing the seam allowance and the outside. I try and make it so I don't have to worry about if it's showing or not. And see, I see the hand quilters or the quilters hand sew their binding, and it's so gorgeous. I think, okay, there's another reason I don't want to be a quilter. I machine sew binding. I think it's fascinating. There was another woman that lived there that she wasn't in my building, but she ran this store, and it was a lot of imported stuff, a lot of Japanese stuff. And she and her husband had lived in Japan, and while he was studying there, he was a professor at the college at the time I knew her. Well, I'm pretty sure. When he was studying there, doing whatever he was doing, she was hanging out with people who were doing specific styles of weaving and dyeing in the Japanese culture that were dyeing art. She was such an interesting person. Her store was just beautiful. She always had such unusual imported fabrics, really special things. Loved going in there. And now, you know, I feel like it's really easy to find Japanese things, but it's more along novelty and stuff. Less along those lost arts. But you do see sashiko and stuff like that right now. It's a little bit trendier. That's not too bad. I have a little bump there. It's not too bad, I know. I think when you don't do something really well, you end up finding a coping mechanism to deal with it and figure out a way that works for you. And when I pinch it like this, oops, I lost my needle. When I pinch it like this, then I'm just grabbing what I want, and I don't have to worry about it. You could machine stitch this if that's the look you want. I think this fabric could bear that. It would look okay, as opposed to my other Charlie, which was a little bit more delicate and more, I don't know, just didn't lend itself to top stitching. Top stitching has such a structured vibe to it. But at least if I'm doing this now, I don't have to do this later, and I'm completely done. You know what's great about this dress is that there's no zippers, there's no buttons, no buttonholes. You are done. You don't need any specific findings. The only thing you need is enough fabric to make the dress. And so if you do the short one, you can probably pull it off with anything in your stash. But I wouldn't recommend doing this in quilting cotton. You could try putting it on the bias, but that neckline is pretty long of a V-neck to put on the bias, so just be careful. Treat it with care. Otherwise, it might get a little stretched out because it'll still kind of be on the bias. Eee! What happened? See, this is why I hate hand sewing. I'm just terrible at it. What happened? Oh, I accidentally pierced my thread. See, you guys? I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to fix that in a second because I'm almost done. Hope you can see what I'm doing. I know I'm making some people cringe for my hand sewing out there. Quick and dirty staring me here. Now it's getting really short though. Okay, there we go. I'm going to tie my knot in my last few stitches just like that. See where I went wrong right here, and I'm going to tie that in a knot. Yeah, I'm obviously not agonizing over this, am I? And if you wanted, you could take that tail and weave it in. But it's just not going to matter right there. I'm done, and that's what's great. Get rid of all those threads. Oops, I forgot my little book was in there. All right, guys and gals and sewists and non-sewists. Woohoo! I'm pretty excited. Like next weekend, I'm going to a show where I'll be vending, and I have like so many new outfits. I'm gonna wear all my handmade things. There's my waist panel. What's that? Oh, it's just a thread. Whew. A little nervous there. It could be better. I know, but I like it. Let's put my hands in my pockets. Especially when these are ironed, I think it's gonna look really nice. Yeah, very cool. I feel like you could make a really cute smock with this, you know, like working and crafting and stuff. Well, I hope you guys find something to sew this weekend. Follow me on Instagram at SewSewLive, and feel free to email me, sewsewlive@gmail.com. And sign up for my newsletter. It's the chickenbootsusa.com website. Don't click in the newsletter that pops up. I'm going to disable that. There's a Sew live stream tab, and if you go there, you can sign up for a newsletter. I only send like one or like two a month maybe, and then that way you can kind of keep up to date with the videos that we have. It's really simple. It's like a nice little diary of what is coming up and what I've just recently done. Thanks, Janice. And but feel free to make some suggestions. Someone requested the Portside Duffel by Grainline Studio, so I'm going to do that soon. I'm totally down to do bags. And I've been thinking about doing my Notions case sewing pattern that we sell on the Chicken Boot site, because I know a lot of people have bought it, and it would be really fun to sew a bunch together and do some binding together. I have a couple of I still have quilt kits on the website, and I still have a couple that's finished sewing here that I used as samples, so I might do that as well, because I need a few less clothes, and I need to start planning a little bit better what I'm going to be making. So anyway, I hope that you guys have a great weekend and happy sewing. Please like, subscribe, and tune in next Thursday. I'm not sure what I'm going to be making, but I will be back, and I really appreciate you coming. Oh, you're getting shirt number 1. Nice, Janice. I hope it goes well. She's the nicest person in the world, that gal, Sonia Phillip. I'm wearing the tunic number 1. I'm going to try and post a picture of it today. So take care, guys, and I will see you next time. Happy sewing.